So guys, this is the story of how the Chinese got me for a lot of money, and Alibaba let them do it. So stick around. You're gonna learn how I got screwed. You're watching Night Drive TV. So guys, as some of you who follow the channel may know, I am developing a headlight kit for the C5 Corvette. It's one of many products that I'm developing and putting together, and it basically incorporated some lights and some light pods. So basically, as I developed that kit, kind of prototyped it in CAD and things like that, I showed it to folks on this channel, and we got a bit of interest. So I knew I was going to have to scale up and buy a lot more lights. So I have imported things probably starting back in somewhere like 2005 was probably the first products that I brought in from Japan, actually. And I think I first imported from China in the early, maybe 2010 or 11. So I'm pretty comfortable with the process. I've actually done a lot of transactions over the years and had really very good results until this one. And this was one of the larger purchases of small volume products I've ever done. I've obviously bought engines and transmissions that cost more, but in terms of multiple products that had to be made specifically for me, this was probably the biggest order I'd done to date. Unfortunately, it was a bad one. So let me kind of quickly show you. So basically, the idea is I wanted a light that fit my kits appropriately, and it was very important that the housings were exact and things worked the way that I had prototyped. So I had basically gotten some samples from them. That's typically the first step. You get some samples, pay them a small fee. They kind of send them to you quickly, and I had done that and had very good success with what they sent me. The light output was what I expected. The shape of the housing was correct. And so then, you know, as I prototyped, I negotiated with them, and they were actually, of the number of suppliers that offered to make these for me, these were kind of the most expensive. They were up towards the upper end because they said they were a big factory. They did a lot of work, and they really had the sales volume numbers to show for it. So I felt confident that even though that we were coming into real kind of post-pandemic, if you will, mid-pandemic supply chain issues, they felt confident that before the Chinese New Year, they could deliver 300 of these to start. So at this point, that's when things got a little interesting. We had agreed on the samples, we had agreed on the price, and you know, as some of you may know, I was really hoping that I could get these first samples before the end of February so that I could see kits ship on March. And so part of my development process for my product obviously revolved around getting a reliable light that I could use. So I submitted the order, and we had agreed, if you could see here, I don't know if that focused, I can't tell on the screen, but you know, the agreement was to kind of engrave Night Drive TV on there. It was to provide a light that was basically as was shown in the samples and in the photos that they had provided. So when I first got an indicator that things were going wrong was after I submitted the order. Now, with Alibaba, you do hear of something called the trade assurance. And the trade assurance kind of is supposed to give you that warm and fuzzy feeling that, you know, that you're kind of protected, that if you submit money and you negotiate with a manufacturer or supplier, that you'll get what you agreed upon, and that if you don't get that, that your money in some ways will be protected, and there will be kind of like an arbitration process. So kind of like how PayPal middlemans deals and negotiates. And if any of you have had real experience with PayPal from a business perspective, you'll know that PayPal, their dispute process is not great. And if people know how to game the system, that's when the system really starts to fail the victim. So in this case, I had a very clear contract for a number of pieces delivered by a certain time. And it was basically by the end of February. So the first indication that I had that something was going to go wrong was immediately probably a week in. They said, well, here's the problem. We're just going to send you the halos in red. And I said, well, that's not going to work, because as you know, if you follow the channel, these were white. And in some states, having red halos and things like that would be, you know, symbolize police or emergency vehicles. You know, that would be a parking lot thing. And this was intended to be a driving light. So obviously the DRL function, the daylight running light, and the halo. So I told them, well, that's not going to work, and that's not what we agreed. We said that it was going to be white. So they said, oh, well, we'll check supply, and we apologized, and the sorries began. So then they contacted me next and said, oh, well, are you aware of the fact these aren't waterproof? And I said, well, they're off-road lights. I mean, they're designed to be in an automotive application and outside, so why would they not be waterproof? And they said, oh, well, we don't have the seals. So here I can get an immediate indication that things were kind of failing, and at this point, under the contract with Alibaba, they were still okay. We were having some disagreements, but obviously the end result needs to be that you get what you ask and agree upon. And so from my perspective, I just kind of kept negotiating with them and said, listen, they need to be white, they need to be sealed. So immediately they said, well, the problem is then after Chinese New Year, which happens towards the end of February, when everything in China shuts down, they said, when we come back, we will make them correct. We'll give you the white halos and we'll seal them up. So I thought, well, if that's the worst that's going to happen here, that's okay. I'll still get the product. It will delay my timeline a bit. And that kind of started the process for me. So basically, February turned into mid-March. Mid-March kind of started to approach April, and they were in breach of the contract at that point. But they were showing me progress pictures. I could see that they had lots of lights, and they showed me pictures of lights like I'll show you on the screen here, just small cell phone shots, and they were kind of a bunch of photos in a composed single photograph to where if I opened it, I could zoom in only so much. And but you know, generally speaking, everything looked fine. I could see that, hey, you know, they put my name on it. That feels exciting, right? And everything, they were sure to show me that up close, and I said, yeah, that's fine, you know, that works for me. They showed them lit up and things like that. This is the first time I've opened this. Okay. Yeah, so everything looked fine overall in the photos. They were the right color. The shape looked correct and things like that. So I went forward with the transaction. We were talking back and forth between the Alibaba platform and Facebook Messenger. And both basically are, it's a record. And so you're fine either way if you communicate with either WhatsApp, things like that. But you need to be sure you can identify who you're speaking with. And I did feel very confident. You could see his profile and things, and I had screenshotted it, that everything was okay. And so, you know, from the pictures, everything looked appropriate. And they asked me very specifically, does everything look good in these photos? And now, based on this photo that I'm putting on the screen, I said yes. It looks like there's a bunch of lights. They showed me the name. It looked appropriate. And everything was fine. Now, where I got into a specific negotiation with them to save cost was I said, well, since I'm making mounts, and as you can see here, I made mounts to go on the bottom of these. So they would typically come with a steel bracket. And I told them, hey, for weight purposes, for cost purposes, leave those out. I don't need the mounting brackets. So they were very specific. Are you sure? And I said, absolutely. I don't need the U brackets. I just need the light and the casting as we had discussed. So they kept saying, are you sure? Are you positive? Yes, I'm positive. So at that point, it seemed all good. So then the shipping process began, and I waited and received all these boxes that I have here. And I opened them up, and I inventoried and realized I was 50 short. So we had gone across the timeline. We had run into a lot of things that weren't agreed upon. And now I was 50 lights short. So I thought, you know, the best thing I can do is test these. So I unboxed one, and this is where I started to realize they had really gotten me on this deal. So as I did comparisons between the samples that they had sent me and basically the housings that they had now, these were much lighter. I could feel the light was lighter. I could see that the housing had changed shape to where it would just take a little less material to make. The back housing here in this area was hollow. It wasn't solid anymore. It was a very cheapened version. I lit them up. They were a little bit dimmer, and actually the optics and the orientation, the LEDs was upside down. Now that could be something in the assembly process. You can flip these optics, and I do believe they just have the optics upside down, but they just weren't what I expected. And obviously because of the lower mount, I couldn't even use them. So now I have 250 lights for quite a sum of money, and I have no idea what to do with them. So I contacted them and obviously initiated the dispute process. Now this is where things got really interesting. Basically, I had submitted my claim to the company directly, and I said, here's the issue is, this does not match the samples. The housings were different. And so their dispute began, well, you said you didn't need the housings to be exactly, you said you didn't need parts. So they kind of included this housing as like, well, since you said you didn't need the bottom bolts, well, this doesn't really matter either. And I said, well, that's clearly not what I said. I said that I needed the casting to be correct, and I showed them comparative pictures. I weighed these. As you can see here, I weighed the differences. I showed them comparative pictures. I showed them the back of the housing was different. I even showed them the light was upside down. And so I gave them an ample amount of evidence to basically show that they hadn't given me what I'd paid for. So they stood firm. They said, well, we gave you what you want and we put your name on it. So, we can't take it back because we can't use it. I knew this was starting to form a bit of a trap based upon the fact that they were going to use this as like, well, look, we can't even sell these to anyone else. They have to stay with him. So I submitted with Alibaba and I said I'm going to lean on the trade assurance. And so that's what I did. I submitted my claim and it was very precise. It showed all the evidence that I needed to show, prior conversations, screenshots. Well, to my surprise and not surprise, the first response that they submitted to Alibaba was massive. It was an overabundance of information so deep that if anybody were to review it, they would get lost in the details. Someone not familiar with the deal prior would have very little ability to look at my information and their information and really decide who was right and who was wrong. Despite the fact that I still felt like in the midst of all the chaos of the information that it was pretty clear that our agreement was breached, that that I had shown them prior, lights and samples that were clearly different. What I started to see was some bias come through. The person, I will say, at Alibaba that was reviewing the case started to kind of defend their argument and say, well, you didn't want the brackets. And so and you did say okay to the picture that they sent you. You okayed the shipment and things like that. So it just really went back and forth to the point that the other company started to respond to Alibaba fully in Chinese. I couldn't even read what they were stating, and you can see here in the screenshots that I couldn't even use a translator oftentimes to copy and paste it because they were screenshotted. So it became very difficult for me to participate in the appeals process with Alibaba even. And so basically, the end result that they offered me is they said, well, we'll give you some refund. We'll refund you a portion of your order to make up for it. But they hadn't sent me 50 lights yet. So I had actually paid for 50 pieces, which I hadn't even received. So that's not a refund. You're just giving me back money for products you hadn't even produced. You haven't even met that portion of the agreement yet. So in breach total, they went over their timeline. They didn't fully deliver the product. The product was different. I proved it through weight, through dimensions, through pictures, through photos. I was very precise in how I presented my case to Alibaba, and Alibaba sided with that company. In the end, they gave me back the money for the 50 that I'd paid for they didn't make, and they gave me $100 in addition. Alibaba decided that $100 was enough for me to re-engineer my mounts. They said that should be plenty for you to fix the problem. So here I am. I have 250 of these lights that I have no use for. And so I've kind of wondered to myself, well, what will I do with them now? Because I obviously can't use them for my kits. They're useful for some purpose. So some of you off-road guys, some of you Corvette guys out there, do you have any ideas? Because I got a whole lot of lights over here. So I may consider putting these on nightdrivetv.com, and you guys can pick these up for super cheap. Less than I paid, to be honest with you, and I figured it'd be enough to just recover a little bit, and maybe you guys could do something with them. I have thought of making like a crazy light bar or something like that for the Tahoe project that I have going, and I probably will do something along those lines, but 250 lights on the Tahoe could be, it'd be a good video, but it would be pretty ridiculous. So we've seen a lot of vehicles in SEMA and things like that with a heck of a lot of lights, but that's really not, it's not really my method. So guys, in summary, what I will tell you is when dealing with Alibaba or any of the kind of mediating agencies that help you negotiate deals with manufacturers and suppliers in China, clearly the catch is, and what they're going to leverage is you agreeing. It's very important that when you get a product made that you see close-up photos, very close-up function, Literally go over everything that you expect right at the end before they ship it, before you agree, and be very specific about that. Make yes or no answers out of things. It's changed my process, and clearly we learn through mistakes and failures and things like that. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm at with these. Guys, I'd love to see your comments, and anybody that's interested, I'm just going to put these on the website. If you guys want to purchase some of these, I'd be happy to send them to you. They do put out light. I'm not sure about the shake. Oh, well, it stopped shaking. It's okay now. So, yeah, I don't know. So I'll stick them on there, guys, and you could play with them. Maybe if you guys have a project, let me know. But lots of videos coming, guys. I got updates with the C5, the C4, and a lot coming. I'm just trying to get my videos going again. So it's 110 degrees out here in Vegas. You can see I'm just suffering. Oh, the suffering. But, yeah, I appreciate you watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.